Okay, so let's turn to the Heart's Card. Page 80. I prostrate to the Arya Triple Gem, thus did I hear. Am I on? Oh, it was on before, so you might have turned it off. Oh, I just turned it off, turned it on. I prostrate to the Arya Triple Gem. Thus did I hear at one time the Bhagawan was dwelling on massive Oshos mountain in Rajagriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, one was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara: how should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and our Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra: Shariputra, any son or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly, beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element, and so on, up to including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to and including no aging and death, or no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the endpoint of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly, completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, should be known as truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared. Tayata Om Gate Gate Padagate Padasamgate Bodhisoha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagawan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage. It is like that. It is like that. One should practice a profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagawan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, and those surrounding in their entirety, along with the worlds of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagawan. I prostrate a gathering of the Dakinis in the three chakras, who abide in the holy yogas of using space. By your powers of clairvoyance and magical emanations, look after practitioners like a mother her child. Akasamara sashada samara samara sashada. Akasamara sashada. Paka samara sashadara samara yape. Tayata gate gate padagate pada samgati bodhi soha. By the teachings of the three dream jewels, I sing the power of truth. Inner and outer hindrances conform. May they be dispelled, may they be pacified, may they be completely pacified. May all negative forces opposed to Dharma be completely pacified. May the host of 80,000 obstacles be pacified. May we be separated from problems and harmful conditions to Dharma. May all enjoyments be in accord with the Dharma. And may there be auspiciousness and perfect happiness here right now. Okay, then the requesting mandalas, page 15. Sachi Purki Suchin Meto Tramarira Blingshi Nete Gen Paji Sange Shinu Mikte Oaye Kohnamda Jila Chu Pashu Jetsu and Lama Nam Kinam Kichu Kala Yense Chu Zinjir Jitazampe Dushishimalaza Yechuki Chapatu Solidam Duratnam Lakam Niryatai Ni Sange Chudan Saki Chonam La Janchu Badu Dabni Kapsuchi Dagi Chunyen Gipe Sunam Ki Trola Panchu Sange Drupa Shul Sange Chudan Saki Chonam La Janchu Badu Dabni Kapsuchi Dagi Chunyen Gipe Sunam Ki Trola Panchu Sange Drupa Shul Sange Chudan Saki Chonam La Janchu Badu Dabni Kapsuchi Dagi Chunyen Gipe Sonam Ki Trola Panchu Sange Drupa Shul. So see here, having generated a mind of refuge and bodhicitta, continue to generate this mind of bodhicitta, thinking, here am I, I'm one human being, one of 7.6 human beings in this world at this time. And so I have that same wish for happiness as each and every other human being in this world. I have the same wish to not to suffer, not to experience any discomfort, anything unpleasant. And so today, experiencing these joyful conditions because the temperatures come down quite some degrees. And so the mind is happier, right? But free, so we can think of all the beings also in the hot hells. Imagine what that is like. If we can't bear, 39, 40 degree heat, then what it would be like the whole lifetime not having the option of aircon, and any other comforts that we have. So having that sense of holding each other dear, holding that sense of connection with each other in our hearts, make it real to our mind, and think, I'm engaging in this, listening, reflecting on the Dharma and Buddhist teachings, Lama Tsongkhapa's precious teachings on the three principal aspects of the path, in order to, at this point, cultivate, because this is what we're up to in the point of the text, cultivate this mind of bodhicitta, of courageous compassion, willing to do what it takes to benefit beings, as long as beings endure, exist in the world. This most profound, spacious, altruistic intention, having already reflected on the mind of renunciation, don't want the suffering for myself alone, thank you very much. And so being aware that conclusion, if I want to be free of one cyclic existence after the other, then so do all my other kind mother sentient beings, because in each and every one of those lives I've had a mother. And so I'm intimately connected with each being that exists. Excuse me. So here we are, bodhicitta. And, you know, we can take situations every day, like maybe the day before yesterday, I tuned in to the Mind and Life conference. I don't know if anyone else tuned in Mind and Life conference on courage, compassion in times of crisis. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and then with all the, you know, professors, Elise Apple and Lani Shiota, and with John Dunn, having this conversation, you know, about the crises in the world today. I know for at Chenrezig Institute last year, when we went into lockdown, we very quickly rebanded the social distancing label to compassionate distancing and social connection. And my mental health professional friends also adopted the social health, the social connectedness, you know, not social distancing. Because if we socially distance, we can't generate this mind of affectionate love and concern and compassion for all beings. Just, yeah. And so this morning, you know, I find the news very helpful to think about these things. I was hearing about or reading about, I can't remember which, but anyway, the news feed comes in, was the bogong moths. Did you hear? 4 billion there were, approximately, until a few years ago. And now there's around a million or so. That's pretty quick, right? Now, maybe like you, I mean, I remember in my childhood, because we had the out the back dunny. You know, we had the dunny man come around and collect the dunny cart. Huh? Nice job. It was a day job, actually, at our place in Raymond Terrace. He came around in the daytime. And anyway, going out to the loo out the back with the bogong moths, and there was a mind of aversion there. So now I'm feeling sorry for all the bogong moths. Well, not sorry, because it's a, you know, having a mind of pity doesn't cut it, you know. So this mind of bodhicitta that realizes those poor bogong moths, and then the pygmy possums, that was part of the same thing, wasn't it? And then bogong moths, they breed in apparently Western Queensland, and then they fly a very long way up into the mountains, and that's where the pygmy possums are. And they've been decimated. There's only like 1,000 or so left. And so many different species, you know, when now we're coming into bushfire season. I remember like Kangaroo Island when they were talking about what different insects would be going out of existence. So beings that we just don't normally pay attention to. And so if I think, what can I do? Then I have to think about, well, what's my global footprint, you know, what my impact on the environment, contributing to global warming, which we have to call climate change because nobody wants to say we're getting warmer, but we are. So we have to contemplate these things, what make it real for us. So here we have, so I was just thinking that this morning. So last week, we just sort of started to touch on this, the mind and body chitta. So if you have the text, page 144, if this intention definitely to leave cyclic existence, the mind of renunciation, is not conjoined with generation of a complete aspiration to highest enlightenment, it does not become the cause of the marvelous bliss of unsurpassed enlightenment. Thus, the intelligent should generate the supreme altruistic aspiration to become enlightened. So this idea of, there's so many different translations. The marvelous bliss of unsurpassed enlightenment. So here, it's the courageous bodhisattva attitude to become a Buddha, to attain perfect happiness. So not just the temporary happiness, as we already talked about that, the unsatisfactory nature of samsara. So generating for ourselves a realization that that is not enough. We don't want that. That the perfect happiness of unsurpassed enlightenment, which is, this genuine ultimate happiness of abiding in this blissful state, of course, not just for our own sake, but for the sake of all sentient beings, thinking of the bogong monks and the pygmy possums and all of us human beings, especially, thinking, here am I, one human being amongst so many. So that intelligence should generate the supreme altruistic wish to become enlightened. So that becomes then a path uniting the intention of renunciation, self-liberation, the middle scope, with the great scope, the Mahayana vehicle. So we do this refuge in bodhicitta prayer and say, in front of the Buddhas, we say, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings, And in our daily practice, through a practice of generosity and so forth, practice of the 6 perfections, all the way up to, as Shantideva said in chapter 9, Bodhisattva's Way of Life, the correct view of wisdom realizing emptiness, which is the 3rd principle of the path, of all the perfections are on the basis of to attain that. So we develop our capacities by this altruistic wish, So this altruism is repeatedly stressed over and over and over, because we have to counteract the self-cherishing mind, this mind of, getting everything for myself alone on the basis of a self that doesn't exist anywhere on any atom of space. And this is what we then interrogate, having met the profound view of Lama Tsongkhapa and the profound understanding of the Buddha's teachings of dependent arising. So we, once we do develop this mind, bodhicitta, this mind of, generating the supreme altruistic wish to become enlightened, the path pleasing to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And it said that, we receive the blessings on the basis of generating. So first of all, we generate that aspiration, that wish, to become enlightened. But then we have to engage in the activities. Otherwise, we're just saying the words. And it's just sort of like telling a lie. It's a bit embarrassing, isn't it? If we continue on with just engaging in our sort of self-centeredness. But also the wise, I think his Holiness says, is it wisely selfish, being wisely selfish? Because if I want my happiness, just look around the world, every single example of real, genuine happiness comes from benefiting others. Every single one, like that is not just a temporary happiness. You know, in 2008, I was in San Francisco with a happiness conference there we were putting on. And there was a woman, I was trying to remember her name this morning, I can't remember her name, Tanya someone. So she had what was called the Happiness Project, and it was teenagers. And it was a project with teenagers going around engaging in different activities. They met with the Dalai Lama. Well, that made them happy, blissful state. But every single one of them, it was engaging with community projects and so forth. So we can't underestimate the powerful impact of a small act of kindness on others, you know. It's profound. Just the smallest act, because we think, oh, we read the text and, you know, just think, oh, it's too hard. Well, we may not deliberately think that, but we sort of feel like it's a long way off, don't we? But by our small acts of kindness, but the basis of that is generating this equanimous mind, this even regard, not you know, let's put it in the right, immeasurable equanimity. You know, we generate these 4 immeasurable thoughts. The first one, immeasurable equanimity, which regards all beings as equal, in that none of us want to suffer and we all want to be happy. We are all the same in that, right? So we have it, you know, through the sublime teachings of Shantideva and the Bodhisattva's way of life, the practice of exchanging self with others, which is an attitude. It's not putting yourself in the other person's shoes. It's not changing your life for their life. It's thinking that, well, there's one of me, 7.6 billion of them, and that's just the humans. I read yesterday there's 120 different species of flies in Australia. Or was it 120,000? Probably 120,000. I mean, a lot. Huh?
It was a big number.
It was a big number, 120,000 possibly, not just 120. That's just the species, not the number of flies, let alone the whatever it is, 4 quadrillion, however many that is, ants. I mean, it's just inconceivable, right? The number of beings. And so we can't hold each and every one of those beings in our mind stream. A Buddha can. But we can cultivate, just like a Buddha's mind, of equal regard, regardless of whether they harm me, help me, or do neither. So again, I turn to the news. I find the news so helpful. Because if you read the news headlines, and usually it's people who've done, well, a lot of it is, not all of it, but people who've done naughty things and got into trouble, right? And instead of the mind of judgmental, you know, moral high ground or aversion or so forth, if we think, what sort of mind does a being have, and let's face it, we're talking about the human beings, to do that, to do those things? Like, what sort of suffering must be in the mind of those beings? And so we develop this sort of affectionate love, seeing, because normally we want to push those people away, or those beings away, the ones we have an aversion towards. But in this training, and more in the training of like Arya Sangha, you know, 7.6 causes and one result, the result being bodhicitta, is that we see, okay, well, I'm connected, first of all, to each and every single sentient being. So given that I've had so many past lives, beginningless past lives, each and every one of them, I've had a mother, and thinking about the mother or the being who played that role in this life. I mean, when I started contemplating, you know, I think I did, you know, I was doing like every day, a few weeks, for a few weeks, only for a few weeks, recalling all the kindnesses of my mother that I could recall in this life every day, you know, sort of contemplating more. It was a bottomless pit of kindness. I couldn't get there. And it was continuing on, of course, because she was still alive at the time. And it was just like, I couldn't get to the end of it, you know. And you know, when I was caring for my mother at the end of her life, you know, I found it a great joy to think of it in terms of repaying the kindness just to this one mother of this one life, because she'd be like, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm taking you away from your career. And it's just like, look, Mum, right now you are my career. You know, and I would say to her, I could never repay to you. I could never pay back the kindness you've shown me. I could never do what you know, done for me. I could never, you know, there's not enough time to accumulate that. And it was, you know, it's true if we contemplate that. And of course we can say, oh, I had a difficult relationship with my mother, blah, 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 blah. It could be your mother, your father, your brothers, your sisters, each and every single sentient being. And even regarding that, for my very survival, I need each and every other sentient being. I'm so interdependent, you know, when we look at the view of dependent arising. I cannot do anything by myself, even though I was a 70s feminist and I was really into the separatist thing. And, you know, we had these, well, I never actually went and lived in any of these, just like the hippies, you know, these communities where I'm going to drop out of society. I'm not going to be part of it all. Now, if that's not delusional, because you are part of it all, maybe except if you live in Prince Hut River Province? Hut River Province still exists. But I think they rely on the tourism, everybody else who goes there, to buy a stamp they can't use, or something like that. You know, it's interesting because, and we've got to be in sync with reality. That's the whole point. That some years ago in, you remember, so it was before, was it 2012? The Mayan prophecy was going to come to fruition. We were going to go out of existence. Mind you, we were going to go out of existence in the year 2000. Remember, we had the computers couldn't cope, and so we were going to go out of existence. Somehow we managed to get through that one. But anyway, His Holiness the Dalai Lama was in Tasmania at the time giving a talk, and I remember the question came, you know, about the Mayan prophecy. And then another question came about the environment. And then His Holiness talked about the environment, and it looked like not responding to the question about the Mayan prophecy. So, of course, His Holiness talking all about, I mean, the Buddha talked about environmental responsibility. We live in this world. We have a responsibility to all the beings in the world. And if we wanted to cultivate this mind of bodhicitta, of caring for each other, we've got to care for the environment and so forth. So I know we're all on the same page on this, right? So His Holiness was talking about, you know, environmental responsibility, courageous responsibility for the environment. Then came back to the Mayan prophecy, and he said, well, in a Mayan worldview of not trading with the outside world, of having a completely inward-looking society, you can see how a prediction of going out of existence, because it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable because we are all interdependent. It's like it's going against that. So it's very interesting to see it from that point of view. I mean, there's no, anyway, so it's good to interrogate what views that limit me in my feeling of that connectedness with others. And it may not be a huge philosophical view. It may be purely what propels us all is this mind of ignorance, which generates indifference. If you don't either help or harm me, who cares? You know, you're not on my radar. But having a sense of, well, okay, maybe at this moment. But of course, we interrogate, you know, the people who've been our parents of this life, maybe were our hostile enemies of a previous life, and yet we love them in this life, or even in this life, you know, even because we're not, you know, we can only hypothetically or listen to the teachings to see, you know, what our relationships, karmic relationships with any other being has been in past lives. But we can look at how we've lived in this life, and that, you know, people who've been strangers have become our best friends. People who've become our best friends have become our enemies. You know, they said one thing that offended this me that doesn't exist, and like you're off the list. You know, I have a friend who, well, she's passed away now, but she talked about this other woman. They were really good friends. And then she said, and one day the other one just stopped talking to me. And that really upset her because they were good friends. Like, what happened? She didn't know what happened. So she asked her friend, what happened, you know? She said, I can't remember, but you really upset me and I don't want to talk to you ever again. But she couldn't even remember what it was. How's that for bizarre? I mean, we're all bizarre, right? But, okay, so, you know, developing this mind of affectionate love based on seeing other beings as attractive, not as my mortal enemy out there, because all of that is the cause of all the weapons in the world or the wars in the world, because on the basis of this self that doesn't exist anywhere in here, out there, or otherwise, that I want to protect, then I have this view, this comes along with the view, having wrong views of, it said the view of the perishing aggregates, the view of my body, my mind, so this collection, mine, my family, my country. And as His Holiness the Dalai Lama was saying the other day, he's really emphasizing this one humanity, one world, because it is actually the reality today more than ever of global interdependence. You know, I remember years ago when I was studying peace studies that at uni, and the teacher was talking about this, we are going to become this stateless world, not individual nation states. And we could say, well, in a way, we're really there, but we keep holding on to this mind. And so look what the mind does. If it affects my people, if it affects me directly, then I want to do something about it. But if I can't see that, and we're all very narrow-sighted, then we're getting different, isn't it? We don't see the need to act. So we have to cultivate this spacious mind. And by, you know, okay, yeah. So by cultivating this affectionate regard towards others, so we can start with those ones that we would label strangers. You know, when I was living in the householder's life and trying to be a Buddhist practitioner, well, you know, practicing, you know, doing the best I could. And like this, like the other day, I saw the most whopping great giant cockroach. And there's a few of those. Yeah. Venerable Yangchen said there's quite a few out there in the shed if I go and look, you know. Huh? I'm wondering what they eat. Oh, they have nests, and then they, you know, they like Dharma centers because we don't kill them. I think they invite all their friends along. Hey, come to the Dharma center. Anyway, So the cockroach. And so there I was, and I didn't want to kill the cockroaches. So I started looking at the cockroaches, and I could see they had little personalities. And like one had goggles. It had white goggles, sort of. And then if you give them a name, you can't harm them. So in terms of the human sphere, all the conflicts that we have, the first aspect of that is dehumanizing the other. In fact, armies train people long and hard in, you know, listening to music that's going to dehumanize and so forth, and you know, desensitize you. And you have to do that, otherwise apparently you can't kill someone. Right? It's tragic. You train people to do that. Anyway, so by developing this, seeing those beings, those cockroaches, whatever, as attractive, right? So having some heart connection to them, whichever beings. And so, and then on the top of that, oh, I don't want you to suffer. I can't kill a cockroach because now it's my friend, because it's got a name. It's part of my family, you know, my family. So then I develop a mind of compassion, but my compassion is limited to my family. So we have different levels of compassion, you know, and we generate, oh, my family, you know, don't you dare say anything about my family. I don't want my family to suffer. But on the basis of that, we've got that compassion. We're hardwired for it. We can't help but help. You know, there's the, you know, okay, we might have for my species. I've got compassion for my species, other human beings, because I know what a human existence is like. I mean, we could say we're pretty short-sighted in that, because if they're in some other foreign country and speak a foreign language and different culture, we're sort of a little bit different, or don't hold the same worldview, very different. So the human species, but even we have that. I mean, animals have interspecies care, compassion, kindness. You know, we as children, you think about little children, just naturally loving, compassionate. Not on that, they haven't yet learnt, you know, racism or politics or the things that we later divide, you know, as we grow up, divides us. So we have to interrogate those things. So cultivate a mind of compassion that is increasingly expanding the scope out towards more and more beings. We also have a level of crisis compassion. Oh, the bushfires. See, a few years ago with the bushfires over east and or even like Kangaroo Island, I don't know, we say south and east, and was it damaging here in that time? I mean, we've got the bushfires now. No, that was, yeah. And everyone around the world was throwing money at Australia for the bushfires. So this sort of response, because we can't bear to see that happening, because people can, but the crisis is over, and that sort of regard for others. So that, you know, it's good, but to have that, imagine having that 24/7 towards all beings. I mean, that's the practice of a bodhisattva. So that when we start to generate that altruistic intention, and indeed we have to be reminded again and again, moment by moment each day, you know, to do that, then even the smallest act with that intention to become enlightened has massive power, massive capability, you know. As it says in the text, you know, even giving the smallest morsel of food to a being born in the animal realm, the tiniest little act of kindness has power. Or reciting Om Mani Padme Hum 10 malas, and then, I mean, how easy is that? It's 10 malas, 10 minutes, or maybe less if you're quick. And every being that touches this air, that touches your skin, gets the blessings of that. you're generating compassion into the world. Or you go into the water to cool down, you've done your Om Mani Padme Hums, and you're blessing every being there. So we can train our mind with the smallest acts to become very, very powerful, inexhaustible. And then, you know, we are blessed by the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. They're delighting in everything. So it says, all ordinary beings are carried by the continuum of the four powerful currents, are tied with the tight bonds of actions difficult to oppose, have entered into the iron cage of apprehending self-inherent existence, are completely beclouded in the thick darkness of ignorance. So like being in a room full of scorpions and you don't know where the scorpions are, you're totally freaking out. You know? We're trapped. So all beings are like this, all ordinary beings. So the four powerful currents or four powerful rivers, of course, the root one of that is the one of ignorance, of confusion, of holding on to a self that doesn't exist on any atom of space. Reifying that, making it permanent, looking after number one, you know, the cherishing mind, me and mine. So we're all experienced that, which traps us. It's the cause of all our suffering, you know, because we're not in sync with reality. It's not reality as it is. I mean, did anyone find bizarre? I'm sure you did. When way back, in the 90s, was it the 90s? The war on Afghanistan? Is that the 90s? I think so. Anyway, you know what I mean. Oh, the 90s was the Middle East, wasn't it? Kuwait and all of that. Iraq, yeah. So the one in Afghanistan, but I remember, oh yeah, because that was the 9/11 thing, response. And it was a war for peace. Now, whenever has there been peace in the world as a result of fighting, of conflict? Ever. You know, that's an approach of, well, I was going to say it's an approach of a being in the animal realm, but actually even animals, even lions and tigers that eat meat and so forth, don't kill without a reason. Like if there's a reason, they don't go willy-nilly, you know, building all these arsenals of weapons and so forth, which can only ever lead to more and more destruction based on this mind of ignorance and wrong views and looking after my country, my people, not realizing the karmic fallout of that, you know, the karma you're creating for your country, for yourself, for all those soldiers and everyone else. And as His Holiness the Dalai Lama reminds us, you know, these are not claws, you know, our hands are soft. These are not fangs. We're not made for ripping each other apart. We're made as human beings for love, for kindness, for caring for each other. So all ordinary beings carried by the continuum of the four powerful rivers, the ignorance, the false views, this view holding on to an inherent, permanent, independent self of me, which I always go here, because when we go, you hurt me, we point here, don't we? I mean, if you open up, you know, surgery, you won't find that me there at all. And that's what part of the interrogation, if like, I've got to see. If there is this me, it's got to be findable. It's got to be findable in here somewhere in one of these bits, fingers or brain or here or big toe or somewhere. Or outside, or, you know, it's got to be like, because if I say my body, maybe I'm outside of this continuum, owning this, you know, owning this body mind. But we know particularly by interrogating that through the Buddha's teachings, that no such self exists. We exist, conventionally we exist, but not as the way we hold ourselves to exist. And why is that a problem? Because we elaborate on this hallucinated I, a whole great bigger story about me, and make ourselves the center of the universe and cut ourselves off from others who actually we're dependent on, right? So this is, you know, this view of the perishing collection, perishing aggregates it's called, which is body and mind, this collection. And then the powerful current of the desire realm itself in which we live, propelled by craving and grasping, which propels us into existence. Craving and grasping, you know, in the 12 links, number 8 and 9, that propel existence, number 10, because we're grasping at being an existent, of being, because this me has to continue on, you know, based on that view. And that propels, you know, more and more suffering, because it's totally all based out of sync with reality, you know. And all the emotions that drive us in this life. You know, you see His Holiness the Dalai Lama talking about, you know, mapping the emotions, getting an understanding for how our emotional states play out and how they cause either happiness or suffering. You know, in this mind and life conversation, one of them mentioned that they did a research in the last year on how people coped with being in lockdown. How did you actually, you know, with COVID itself, with lockdown and so forth. And what was interesting, the two main factors of resilience in that, kindness and joy, particularly joy. So we also, you know, in the four immeasurables, we have immeasurable equanimity, immeasurable love, compassion, which was what we're talking about generating here, but immeasurable joy, joyfulness, which is indeed the cause of this ultimate happiness. That all beings be, you know, abide in that state, not just myself, but all other beings abide in that state. Free from any suffering, free from holding others close, some close, others distant, free from all the toxic emotions, free from this mind of ignorance, everything. That is a state of bliss. That is on the basis of reality as it is. But then we're propelled by all of these emotions. And even so, the fourth one is said to be the form and formless realm. So even in the form and formless realm, you know, even these 8 levels of exquisite levels of concentration, such that your body becomes a very subtle form, not a clunky body like this. And exquisite levels of concentration, on the basis of which you develop clairvoyances, you develop more and more refined levels of the mind. And so you're almost free of, you get up to the peak of existence, almost free of samsara, but you haven't eliminated the afflictive obscurations, the subtle afflictive obscurations. So you haven't eliminated the disturbing emotions. You haven't eliminated the innate self-grasping. And you end up back in the whole cycle again and again and again. So it's not enough, you know. So we're all trapped, regardless. And, you know, if we think about being in an iron cage or being tied with the, you know, your hands and feet tied, and that you can't go anywhere, you can't do anything, that sense of being trapped. I really like what works for me a lot is that Nosho Kensho Rinpoche's verse, beautiful verse, that you know, he was a great Dzogchen master. You're probably familiar with it, but it makes a beautiful meditation. Rest in natural great peace. You know this one? Rest in natural great peace. This exhausted mind, beaten, helpless by karma and neurotic thoughts. Every single word is graphic, you know, is a contemplation in itself. Like the relentless fury of the pounding waves in the infinite ocean of samsara. Rest in natural great peace. So just that, to remind ourselves of what it's like, not just for myself, but each and every other single sentient beings born into cyclic existence limitlessly, and in their birth tortured ceaselessly by the three sufferings. So we know the three levels of suffering, you know, suffering, we know about, even animals know, suffering of suffering, of pain and loss and grief and so forth. And the suffering of change that we take to be happiness. But the fact of anywhere in this samsaric existence is in the nature of suffering. Thinking thus of the condition of mothers who have come to such a state, which means all the other ones, generate the supreme altruistic intention to become enlightened. So we generate that aspiration, and then on the basis of that, engaging bodhicitta, taking vows, bodhisattva vows. And actually, if we take the bodhisattva vows, or any vows, we have to know what it is to keep those, and have to know what it is when we break those. What are all the downfalls? What are all the ways in which I can break them, you know? By the time you get through the 18 main ones and the 46 downfalls and all the commentaries on that, and go, hold on, I've got to start again. I've forgotten number one, right? But ultimately, that intention that's at the basis, sometimes said there's one vow, but then we have all the different ways of breaking. That's why we have to renew them each day, familiarize each day. Anytime you have an opportunity, you know, His Holiness the Dalai Lama last year, I don't know how many times gave bodhisattva vows. I sort of lost count. And this year too, online, like take every opportunity. And sometimes you don't know the opportunity is coming. One time, actually, His Holiness said, okay, tomorrow I'm giving the bodhisattva vows. So I want you to recite, you know, this many Manjushri mantra, this many Om Mani Padme Hungs and so forth. And we all go and do our diligent homework. And then it didn't come along. But we did our homework, you know. Probably skillful means His Holiness, where people turn up, oh, bodhisattva vows, I'll turn up for that one. But then you've got to actually do it, you know. So if we take those vows, we've got a commitment to go out there and engage in the practices of generosity, you know. Giving even the smallest, like when I was at Vajrayana Institute, and this little Tibetan girl came up and gave me the smallest flower. And that brought such joy to my mind, because believe me, I did not notice the flower until she was right in front of me with this tiny flower, which was huge for her mind, right? was so beautiful, such a touching thing, you know, that heart connection that can uplift the minds of others. This is our intention, you know, generosity of giving. Of course, we talk about giving, you know, of material things. We talk about giving of love, freedom from fear, protection from fear. And if we're talking about protection from fear for each and every single sentient being, then it's the Dharma. You know, when we have that wheel of life, of, you know, the 12 links, and the Buddha's above that, showing the way out of all of that. So that's sort of like our responsibility in whatever way we can to give the Dharma is most important. And then practice of patience. We have to be patient with ourselves in our practice, not beat ourselves up for what we're not doing, take delight in what we are doing. And being reminded, as His Holiness the Dalai Lama always says, you know, take the long view. If you've got a option to work for the short term or the long term, always the long term, right? So that, yes, right now, I do not have uncontrived, you know, spontaneous bodhicitta that every single moment is sort of like, is for others. But there are beings in the world who do have, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, like Lama Zopa Rinpoche, look at that. Never even asked for so much as a cup of tea or anything for himself, let alone a holiday. Oh, excuse me, I'll see you tomorrow, you know, he's like, Rinpoche's always there. I don't know if you've, you know, one time I went to see Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and it was the end of the retreat, very, very end of the retreat. And so the people at the retreat, this was the Lamp on the Path in North Carolina one time, which is they're going to redo again next year. Just courageously sent out an email saying it's going to happen, right? Rinpoche is going to be in Nepal though, so it'll be on Zoom. So it's going to be hybrid. So we can go, yeah, Zoom and face-to-face, certain number of people, and then also online. Anyway, so it was at the end of that retreat. And at the end of the retreat, this was sort of like a month, I can't remember if it was a month, must have been a month long. And then there was a dinner with everybody at the local cafe, restaurant. And that was when I was talking to Rinpoche, and, or at least sitting with Rinpoche, listening. I don't know if I was doing much talking. And then Venerable Roger's coming in. Oh, Rinpoche, the people are waiting at the restaurant. The people are waiting at the restaurant. You know, the students are waiting, and I'm feeling like, and I'm like, oh, just go. And then Rinpoche looks up and says to Venerable Roger, oh, but I have to do that puja for that person who before I go. It's like capacity, and we can be inspired by that, and we can see it's possible. We see these beings in the world for whom it's possible. And watching His Holiness the Dalai Lama with these like mind and life people, the people who are already engaged, and giving them more jobs to do, and ways of talking that makes sense to them in this very life, that then they're holding this mind of courageous compassion. So for ourselves, it takes a lot of courage to engage in this. The perseverance that comes along with the, you know, joyous effort to delight in everything that we do, because we need to never give up. We need to continue on in our practice, you know. So like this, cultivating all the perfections. So we engage in those practices. Long view means 2 countless great eons of that. Thank you. That's after your other previous count was great. But as it says, you know, then we have to have, on the basis of having a correct view of reality, the unique teaching of the Buddha on dependent arising. You know, this is another text by Lama Tsongkhapa in praise of dependent arising. So the most, and then the correct view that of reality. And this is why His Holiness in this talk the other day was actually saying, look at the world, look at the fact we are globally we can't hold on to nation states anymore. He didn't quite say it like that, but that's basically what he was saying. Like, it's, you know, the past few centuries have been about fighting each other, having world wars, having wars here, there, and everywhere. It hasn't got us out of all of this, you know. But here we are, our global interdependence, of course. If you do not have the wisdom realizing the way things are, even though you have developed the thought of definitely leaving cyclic existence, as well as the altruistic intention, so renunciation, bodhicitta, the root of cyclic existence cannot be cut. Therefore, work at the means of realizing dependent arising. So Lama Tsongkhapa, taking all the philosophical views of dependent arising, in other words, we would say global interdependence, but even at the most subtle views of that, well, what does that mean? That means there's nothing, either myself or any other phenomena, that exists out there from its own side in an independent, permanent, singular way, unitary way. You know, my mother said I was fiercely independent at 4 years old. But I wasn't, I was just stubborn, was what she probably meant. Because there was no way I was independent, even when I would get my little case and I had long hair. And I'd pack up my ribbons and my dogs and leave home. Where was I? How was I going to live on ribbons and dogs, you know? Anyway, I used to go around the block. She'd be waiting for me when I got back. Doesn't take long to realize you're not independent. Except this stubborn mind. It's true, isn't it? So we have to counteract that view, because we have it, we do have it. We have it from, well, not just from birth, we have it from before birth. That's what propels us into existence. So yes, we're going to have, as long as we're in samsara, we're going to have this innate self-grasping, such that we have to interrogate the different levels of dependent arising. That everything arises in relation to causes and conditions. Like we have the primary cause for our, you know, throwing karma into this life, which you could say is the last thought that we have in our mental continuum as that being of the previous life. In the dissolution process, it's that last moment that propels our existence. But then we have all the other karma conditions that come around that, all the afflicted states of mind, all the delusions, on the basis of this ignorance grasping at the innate sense of self. So we have to interrogate, you know, all the wrong views I have. Finally, so causes and conditions dependent on all the parts, whether that be of myself, of any object, of, you know, everything is interdependent. And why did the Buddha distinguish in that way of parts? Because it's, I mean, causes and conditions, everybody gets that to some extent, and we don't know what they are. We don't know exactly every cause and condition. We don't know in every finger snap all those 64 karmic moments that are going to ripen in some future experience. We don't know what they all are, but we do know at a gross level, right? But the dependent on the parts means, because there are the views, Buddhist views, which Lama Tsongkhapa refuted, but there must be something there from its own side out there independently. There's got to be some essence of something. And it's that view, and now I go, that, you know, the search for the Higgs boson, the God particle. There's got to be a particle, right, as the basis of everything. That view is still alive today, very much so. Scientific materialism, very much. There's a sense of there's got to be, but surely there's got to be something. I mean, what I find so profound is that the Buddha spoke about, you know, this infinitesimal, or even other philosophical views spoke about the infinitesimal elements of existence, you know, before we ever had the invention, or sorry, not invention, discovery of the atom, let alone splitting the atom, let alone all the getting down to more and more refined bits of atoms and so forth. There's still investigations going on because but it was right there in the Buddha's teachings that not even some teeny tiny essence of anything, of any of those parts being independent, right? There's no God particle. Did they find it? They spent a lot of money.
I'm not sure. I think it's all theoretical.
It's all theoretical.
Mathematical models.
Oh, mathematical models have discovered, but they can't find it. Just like they can't prove that mind comes from any substantial matter, because it doesn't, you know. So, and then the most subtle view of that, by mere label. So like the cockroach that became my family member because I gave it a name. Suddenly it had a life story that didn't exist before. It was like cockroach aversion, you know, or at the best indifference. But suddenly there's a connection because I gave the label, you know. My mind gave the label. So that by mere labeling, mere imputation that things exist as that, it's not that they don't exist, they exist, but we reify them. We create elaborate stories. We make it something existing out there once we put that label, and to then tell a whole elaborate story that has no foundation in reality whatsoever, just in our mind or in our mathematical equation. So when we, you know, sort of realize this, we also, like all the different views that exist, we realize are non-existent from their own side. Each and every one of them, all the views we hold on to so tightly and create wars over. So therefore, work at the means of realizing dependent arising. Whoever sees that cause and effect of all phenomena of cyclic existence and nirvana as infallible, thoroughly destroys the mode of misapprehension of these objects as inherently existent. So basically, we first establish everything is a dependent arising. Everything is interdependent. First establish that. And by establishing that, it cannot at the same time exist out there of its own side, one infinitesimal atom even of true existence of, you know, different terms are used because there are different philosophical views of, you know, by way of its own characteristics or so forth. So we interrogate at more and more refined levels this.
Whoever sees the cause and effect, thoroughly destroys the mode of misapprehension of these objects as inherently existent. Now, I can say that intellectually, I know that this table is not a solid entity. Even the scientists can tell me that. That's a bunch of molecules all coming together in this particular form. But my mind still wants it to be something fixed, right? Permanent, reliable, stable, because I want to put things on it. So of course I still see it as that. But, you know, it said that, you know, you just chip away, chip away, chip away. And you just look at things around you and just realize it's an impermanent, it's changing moment by moment. It's made up of all these bunch of molecules and atoms whizzing around in space, including myself. I mean, when you do the meditation on you know, applying that to your own body-mind continuum and investigate where this I is, and you go down to all the most subtle atoms, and then you think about all your atoms flying around in space. I'm just like, hold on a minute, where did I go? Good, good, is good, but freaky. So this is a path pleasing to the Buddhas because it's in sync with reality. And so by investigating dependent arising, we come to the view of emptiness of inherent existence, because you can't have both. It's got to be one or it's got to be the other. Either things truly exist out there permanently, independently, or so forth, or whichever particular view of that, or it is dependent, but the two are contradictory. They cannot coexist, you know.
In physics, the observer is needed for existence.
Yes, we would say the same. Observer is needed for, I know physics is why I think His Holiness Dalai Lama is so excited to meet with the particularly relational physicists, you know, coming out of quantum physics, relational physics, where if, in this word, where if two beings pass, so you pass, something changes in between there. Not just yourselves, but something in the middle. You know, this is part of this relational physics, that we are all impacting each other in absolutely everything. And the observer thing I find really fascinating.
And the observer actually changes the reality.
Yes, that's it. It changes it. Because, you know, when I was studying at uni some years ago, and the notion of an objective observer, you know, this was part of the research methodology. And I had such trouble with that. It's just like, there's no such objective observer. So I think I actually did a project on observing small group interaction and the impact of observer on that. I mean, you don't know the impact of observer if you're not there, right? But we have to interrogate that, because there's no such objective. But there was this idea that you could have an objective reality. And this is what the Buddha said doesn't exist, right?
And also then the observer actually changes reality.
And the observer changes reality. And yes.
Electrons.
To electrons.
They spin in different directions.
Yeah.
As soon as you try and observe one, you change it.
Yeah, fascinating, isn't
So
it?
you can never.
Yeah, it's exciting, isn't it? It's proving what the Buddha taught.
Mm.
It's very exciting.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So as long as the realization of appearances, so things, the fact that things do appear is the infallibility of dependent arising, because things only ever come into existence, abide and go out of existence. So for them to arise, there's got to be the causes and conditions for them to abide, for them to go out of existence, and so forth. And realization of emptiness, which is the non-assertion of inherent existence. In other words, we could say it cuts through all those views of something existing truly from its own side, something existing by way of its own essence or substance. You know, if you go through the different Buddhist tenets, it's just sort of like, I've just been entrenched this past few weeks in the mind-only view, Chittamatrin view, where there is a self-knower, because there's got to be something there that's going to do. No, there's no inherent self-knower, self-cognizer, whatever. So whatever more subtle views. And that while these two seem separate, so while the view of dependent arising seems separate from the view of emptiness of inherent existence, we've got more work to do. The analysis of the view of emptiness is not yet complete. So in other words, still more hard yards to do. So that holding it separately. So what it's saying is, when something comes into existence, which is a conventional truth, its ultimate nature comes into, or emptiness comes into existence at the same time when it goes. So, you know, cup. When the cup came into existence, the emptiness of the cup, which is its ultimate mode of existence, also came into existence. When it goes out of existence, also its emptiness will go out of existence as well, right? Of cup, emptiness of cup, because the cup goes out of existence. Otherwise, it's like, what are you talking about? There's nothing there. That's my very crude understanding. So we've got to reach a point where the mind focusing on one. So when, you know, the appearance, say, of the object, conventional truth arises, its ultimate nature arises. And when the ultimate nature arises, its actual conventional nature arises, that we realize that these two, and this was the unique presentation of Lama Tsongkhapa, of the refined view of the middle way consequence school, the middle way school, of that these are not contradictory at all, and that they abide in the same mind. And that, okay, when they exist simultaneously without, oh, did I skip? Yeah, when the two realizations simultaneously without alternation exist, and when from seeing dependent arising as infallible, definite knowledge destroys a mode of apprehension of the conception of inherent existence. So this destroys dependent arising, destroying this nihilistic view, and then emptiness, destroying the idea of permanence, destroying the view of the inherent existence, which is definite. So once you've got that, you're definitely, like, you've got certainty about that, and the two do exist in the same mind at the same moment, then your analysis of the view is complete. I mean, it all sounds a bit theoretical, doesn't it?
Can I ask a question?
Please do.
I can understand about analyzing objects up there, but when it comes to analyzing,
This is where the real work is analyzing the self. Yes.
Yeah, so when it comes to analyzing the mind, then does the mind have the capacity to know itself if it is not inherently existing?
Does the mind have the capacity to know itself? It is not inherently existent. If it is not inherently existent. If it was inherently existent, it wouldn't have the capacity to know itself. Because it'd be permanent. Because, yeah. So, because, in other words, what said, because of emptiness, everything is possible.
All creation comes about because of emptiness.
Because of emptiness of inherent existence, of true existence, because otherwise it'd be, you couldn't work with the mind, right?
Okay, so then causal conditions cannot influence.
Because nothing would change if it was inherent existence. How is that capacity for change possible? But because of emptiness, absolutely everything is possible. Because we've got to always think emptiness, and we've got to think not nihilism, but emptiness of existing from its own side, of being permanent. So it destroys the idea of eternalism or permanence. At the same time, we do have there is continuity of consciousness. That continuity of consciousness is that very subtle, clear light mind that, at the time of death, beings who have control over that would use that time of death to actually gain, because it's such a subtle level of mind, the most subtle level of mind, if we could access that. But those of us, we also, those of us if you're familiar with the dissolutions of the death process and you arrive in this clear light mind, conventional clear light, but then, we're propelled by the grasping at innate self into the reversal of that process into another body. There's no way that we can be aware at that time unless we do all these hard yards,
So what determines the difference between one clear light mind from another is actually the karma, isn't it?
What determines?
Well, otherwise
no, the clear light mind, so is from, having this direct perceptual realization of emptiness, then you're in sync with what is, so that you've completely purified the afflictive obscurations, in other words, all the non-virtuous mental states, including the root ignorance, which cuts the root of samsara. So that is what does that. But here is talking about, on top of that, ultimate bodhicitta, because your bodhicitta mind, your altruistic mind, makes that realization much more powerful, and your realization makes your altruistic mind much more powerful, so that they're complementary in that way. And then you combine the two, which is ultimate bodhicitta. Okay. Further, the extreme of inherent existence, of permanence, is excluded by knowledge of the nature of appearances, and here it comes, of being merely labelled by the mind, which means existing only as nominal designation, mere imputation. It's so hard for us to get, we hear it, but that I am, merely labelling. I remember years ago people saying, oh, I put on every object I have in my house, merely labelled cupboard, merely labelled this, merely labelled that, merely. It's good because it sort of brings us into the mind of thinking like that. And so it can be a handy little tool to have along the way, but it's much more subtle than that. That our mind imputes onto something, it existing as such. And the extreme of total non-existence is excluded by knowledge of the nature of emptiness, in other words, destroying nihilism. That is the absence of inherent existence, not the absence of nominal existence. So again, we've got to come down to, it's not that things don't exist, because the nihilistic view would say, well, if you're saying nothing exists, then everything goes and it doesn't matter, and people can have that view, but it's not the view of the Buddhist teachings. If within emptiness, the way of appearance of cause and effect is known within emptiness, the way of the appearance of cause and effect is known. So this is the most subtle obscuration that we have to eliminate is the cognitive obscuration, which maybe not grasping at the innate sense of self, like we've eliminated true grasping, but we haven't eliminated at the self, but we haven't eliminated grasping at true appearances, things appearing to exist truly. So this is said to be then eliminated along the bodhisattva, grounds 8, 9, 10. And then you're not captivated by extreme views. When you have realized thus, just as they are, things just as they are, without our elaborations, the essentials of the three principal aspects of the path, renunciation, bodhicitta, correct view, resort to solitude and generate the power of effort. We were talking about joyous effort, enthusiasm, perseverance, and accomplish quickly your final aim. So this brings us back to saying, making the use of our precious human rebirth. We don't know when we're going to die, so do it quickly. If whatever views whatever understandings we generate, take those onto the meditation cushion, even if we can't go and do long retreats somewhere, wouldn't that be great? But, having a mind, when it says in solitude, it's the mind in solitude. So when we sit down for our meditation or so forth, he's encouraging us to practice, to put it into practice on the cushion, to have the realizations ourselves. We have to do the study, we have to do the understanding, dispelling qualms. I mean, Lama Tsongkhapa, in that 3rd volume of the Great Treatise on the Path of Enlightenment, he takes every single fault in different views and shows the error of that. And then that is helpful because it shows how our minds work, that we all hold all of those views, whether at a coarse level, whether at a more subtle level or so forth, to realize I've got to refine and refine and refine my understanding of my own mind. And then I can only do that eventually on the cushion. And I'm doing it, why? With this great, huge altruistic motivation to become a Buddha, to benefit all beings. And I have to know precisely how to do that. Okay. That's in brief, the 3 principles of the path. His Holiness the Dalai Lama is giving a teaching on this, believe it or not. I think it's actually on Lama Tsongkhapa Day. I didn't check. Is it Lama Tsongkhapa Day? Anyone check? And I think Rob mentioned about having it screened here, that people can come here. What time? That would probably be 11:30 a.m. That's normally what time, is 11:30 a.m. for us, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. So we can delight in all our practice and take great joy and dedicate. Page 17. Gewadi Nududa Lama Sanke Drigune Drowa Chika Malupa De Sala Gopa Sho Janchu Sencho Grimposhe Make Panam Ge Kuchi Ge Panyampa Me Payang Gongne Gongdu Pelwa Shu. And then the long life prayers for our precious gurus. Chik Ten Kam Dear Pende Mahalupa Gang Le Shung Wei Sampe Ishino Kadri Insome Tentin Gatsola So what is so and long life prayer for Kyabje Sopa Rinpoche, page 22.
Tu su shai chin jam gun gyao wei ten zin gom pao wei kun zu no po se chuk sum ko wei le mon tu ru pa da su nu je gu nu jap tin shu. And then for the Tenzin also, Lord of Dharma, who in accordance with the various dispositions of those to be subdued, makes clear in the light of your well-spoken advice the sacred Ganden tradition, essence of Buddha's teachings, O foremost and holy Lama, to you who are supreme. O Lama, please, please live long. Thank you very much, everybody. That's it. And I wish you well over the, oh no, next few weeks. Oh, if I don't see you tomorrow, we have Tara Pridger, Sunday we have teachings. But then I'm off to Bunbury for a couple of weeks. Back in time for our end of year celebrations.